Today, we're diving into a blueprint for ethical business that's, believe it or not, over 1,400 years old. And it might just hold some key answers to our biggest modern economic headaches. So, let's get into it. Business, the profit's way.
It's a question a lot of us probably ask ourselves. You see the headlines, right? The corporate greed, the growing inequality. It's really easy to get cynical. We're constantly told that profit is the only thing that matters, no matter who gets hurt. But what if there's another way? What if an ancient model could give us a totally fresh perspective?
To even start looking for that other way, we've got to get practical. Because so often, the whole search for a better economy gets completely bogged down in abstract theories. Complex financial models that just feel totally disconnected from our actual lives.
And this quote from Professor Uswatun Hassana just hits the nail on the head. So many of these conversations about ethical economics get stuck in this ivory tower, right? They're all about high-level banking and insurance systems, but that has nothing to do with the reality of business on the ground, whether we're talking about a giant corporation or just someone selling fruit at a market stall.
So here's the bottom line. We need a framework that's not just for academics and bankers. We need an ethical model that actually works in the real world, something that can guide every single purchase, every sale, and every business deal, no matter how big or small.
So where on earth do we find a framework like that? Well, our sources point us to the life of the Prophet Muhammad, but looking at him through a really different lens, not just as a spiritual leader, but as a seriously successful entrepreneur.
And the main source we're digging into here is this book, Business ala Nabi, which translates to Business, the Prophet's Way. What it does is it reframes his entire life's work by focusing on his deep, hands-on experience in commerce and trade.
And this wasn't just some small part of his life. Far from it. As this verse from the Quran shows, people at the time actually pointed it out. It was a defining part of who he was. He wasn't locked away somewhere. He was right there in the middle of it all, walking the markets every single day.
And this just shows you how deep that experience ran. I mean, get this. His business career started when he was only 12 years old on a trade mission. By 17, he's already an independent merchant. Then he ends up managing trade caravans for a super successful investor, Khadija, who was so blown away by his skill and his integrity that she actually proposed marriage to him. His reputation as a trustworthy international trader was known all over the region. This was not a side hustle. This was his life's work for decades.
So what was his secret? What made him so successful? Well, it wasn't just that he was good at business. It was this deep, personal code of ethics that guided every single thing he did. It was his moral compass.
And that compass was built on 4 key pillars. And you should think of these less like fuzzy virtues and more like a killer business strategy. First up, al-shadiq, just radical honesty. Your word is everything. Second, al-amana, being completely trustworthy. People had to know their money was safe with you. Third, al-tabliq, total transparency. No secrets, no hidden clauses. And finally, al-fatana, deep professionalism. You got to be good at what you do. These 4 things together weren't just nice ideas. They were the engine of his entire success.
But look, this model wasn't just a list of things you should do. It also drew some very clear red lines, unethical practices that were absolutely forbidden because they just poisoned the market for everybody else. So, this system flat out banned things like ithakar, which is hoarding essential goods to jack up prices. Think of someone buying up all the baby formula during a shortage. It banned najasi, which is basically using fake bidders to inflate prices, kind of like the original version of auction fraud. It was also illegal to intercept sellers on their way to town to lowball them before they knew the real market price. And any deal built on deception or crazy high interest loans was out. The goal was simple: protect the marketplace for everyone, especially the most vulnerable people in it.
And these weren't just suggestions on a piece of paper, oh no. They were actively enforced. And there's this one famous story that just perfectly captures this commitment to fairness.
So one day in the market, the prophet walks up to a pile of dates for sale. He sticks his hand deep inside and feels that they're wet underneath. The seller had put the good, dry dates on top to hide the lower quality, wet ones at the bottom. And his response was swift and absolute. "Whoever among you cheats is not one of us." This wasn't just about a few bad dates. It was about the core principle that deception has absolutely no place in a healthy economy.
Okay, so we have the personal ethics, we have the market rules, but what's the big picture? What's the end game here? Well, the ultimate goal is to build an entire economy that serves all people, not just a wealthy few at the top.
the source actually uses this Indonesian term, ekonomi karakyatan, which basically means a people's economy. And what is that? It's an economic system where the policies are intentionally pro-poor. The main focus isn't just on abstract growth, it's about making sure that small businesses, farmers, and everyday workers have real access to capital and real opportunities.
Let's just put these two visions side by side. On the one hand, you have the people's economy, which is pro-poor. It's all about building from the ground up and creating access for the many. On the other hand, you have what's often called a liberal economy, which is pro-market, focusing on freedom for big corporations with the hope that wealth will eventually trickle down. The fundamental priority is just completely different.
And don't think for a second this is just some ancient history lesson. Indonesia's own founding father, Muhammad Hatta, explicitly said that he based the nation's cooperative economic principles, which are written right into the Constitution, on these exact same Islamic values of justice and brotherhood. This ancient blueprint has literally helped shape modern nations.
So what's the core philosophy driving all of this? What's the one big idea? It really comes down to this verse from the Quran. The whole point of the economic system is to make sure that wealth circulates widely through all of society, instead of just getting stuck in the hands of a few.
And that brings us right back to where we started. This ancient model shows us that business doesn't have to be a cynical, greedy game. It leaves us with a really powerful question. What if every single transaction we make, every business we choose to support, is a small chance to help build a fairer, more transparent world?